Now, while the ANC's top six has come out strongly against corruption, there are concerns that the party has not been consistent in implementing its conference resolutions. Even more worrying is the fact that members facing criminal charges who have been ordered to take special leave may well challenge the NEC's instructions in court, as they are not legally binding. Now, there are calls for the party to change its electoral system that has so far failed to prevent members tainted with corruption from taking up positions in public office. Let's unpack the story now. We're joined by the ANC's head of presidency, Sibongile Basani. Sibongile, good morning. Thanks very much for your time this morning on the AM report. And this was a theme that came out of that virtual briefing that was held by the top six on Monday. This issue that the party is not implementing resolutions taken at its conferences, the NEC itself coming out disagreeing with that. I think members of the public might have a different take on it. But what do you have to back that up, that the party does indeed follow through with conference resolutions?
Thank you very much and good morning. I think it's important to state that the officials led by President Ramaphosa were quite clear, and it was important that the president leads the presentation of officials, because he is empowered by the Constitution to direct and orient activities of the African National Congress. The issue that there is no implementation of resolutions of the conference, it's a narrative that was created immediately after the conference and by some. And that narrative has been going on, despite the fact that immediately after the conference, one of the resolutions that was adopted was the issue of free education. And under the stewardship of President Ramaphosa, the process to really fund free education has kick-started, and there is progress in that regard. And this is despite, of course, the fact that there are still imperfections, but the whole process is being rolled out. The whole program is being rolled out, as we all know. Mm-hmm. And then there was the issue of the land. And on the eve of elections, after our workshop on land, the president announced around our stance on the issue of land, that requires that there should be no compensation on the issue of land, especially with regards to restitution, tenure, and security of tenure. So we have pronounced on that, the president has pronounced on that, and the process now is in government, and it is already in government. It has been dealt with as a special committee on this. Mm-hmm. And this is a resolution that flows from the conference resolution. Yeah. So indeed, on the economy, you would remember that there is quite a very strong resolution that we need a radical socio-economic transformation. And in the context of this radical socio-economic transformation, the president has always gone further to unleash launch the district model to ensure that what the kind of development that has to take place, the development that is targeted to people who need it. Of course, there are areas that deals with systemic issues of the economy that are not yet attended to. And the NEC, if you remember, President also pronounced that very soon the NEC will also be dealing with the reconstruction and recovery of the economy. And
do you mind me butting in there and just trying to steer the conversation to the letter that the president issued to members now a weekend ago, and what prompted the president to write this very strongly worded letter to members of the governing party, which is the issue around the rising and increasing challenge of corruption. The president himself saying, and this is a quote from the letter here, "We need to take responsibility the ANC has been and remains deeply implicated in South Africa's corruption problem. And in that letter, the President really talks a lot about some of the resolutions taken at the 2017 National Conference around corruption. And he, in fact, laments the fact that corruption has not been tackled as seriously as that conference had resolved to do. What is your answer to that?
No, indeed, I was trying to demonstrate that we've been implementing conference resolutions, and that's what, under the stewardship of the President, has been taking place. And on the issue of corruption, the issue of corruption or the statement of the President flows from the diagnostic report and the conference resolutions. And in the context of the fact that corruption is one of the major distractions, the major sideshows that has impacted on our delivery program, the NEC of the ANC had to resolve on it quite robustly in the context of the conference resolution. So when we talk about implementation of conference resolutions, I think the President is leading that program together with the officials. So the allegation that the President is presiding over the ANC, that is not that is reluctant to implement conference resolution it's unfounded. So the letter speaks to the resolutions, and part of our resolution says factionalism, corruption are very rampant within our ranks. Therefore, the ANC is judged. That's what we are saying on our resolution, is judged as part of the problem. And that is why the President had to write a letter flowing from the collective decisions of the NEC and the officials. That's the letter that speaks to the members of the African National Congress, that now that we are on course to take bolder steps in implementing conference resolution, it is critical that we take responsibility as members of the ANC, because if we don't do so, the brand, the African National Congress, will remain tainted. And it is our duty as members of the ANC to protect the brand of the African National Congress.
Sibongile, I have to interrupt you there again, because we have limited time and I'm trying to get through a few issues with you. I want to ask you about whether the ANC constitution makes provision for members to step aside, as the President said in his address on Monday. Anyone, I'm paraphrasing, who has a whiff of corruption around them must step aside from any leadership positions within the governing party. Is there provision for that, and what happens if a decision which in fact is not legally binding is then taken to court?
No, the Constitution of the African National Congress obliges members of the ANC not to act in a manner that taints the brand, the African National Congress, and therefore anyone who is believed to be acting against the Constitution has got to be acted upon. Secondly, we have a conference resolutions that are binding on all members, including the leaders of the African National Congress. And flowing from that understanding, the members of the ANC are not only measured on the Constitution, they are measured on their revolutionary consciousness, their political consciousness to abide by the rules and regulations of the ANC.
So what happens if they take that decision on review? To court, in fact?
Look, we're a constitutional democracy. And in a constitutional democracy, if people feel very strong that they are being hard done by our decisions, then they have a right to do so. But it has been proven many times that even in the courts of law, the laws actually refer members of the ANC back to their own constitution, to our own resolutions. And in between conferences, the National Executive Committee is a structure that is supposed to take decisions. So the Constitution of the ANC upholds that position quite strongly. And we want to believe that in this instance, members of the ANC, in terms of the resolutions and the Constitution of the ANC, are required to act in a particular manner In other words, not to conduct themselves in a corrupt way. So if there are accusations, if there are allegations, they must actually be taken to task, and that is what the ANC is doing.
All right, well, thanks very much for coming on to the AM Report. Thanks for your time. Sibongile Besani is the ANC's head of presidency as we continue to track the story around the ANC and how it is dealing with corruption in its own ranks. And as we know, actions speak louder than words.